Alright, so this second video is now for solving missing sides of 30, 60, 90 triangles. So it's pretty much the same process that we did with 45, 45, 90, but now we have different side lengths. So to represent the shortest side of the triangle, we use S, which is always going to be opposite from your 30-degree angle. So 30 is the smallest angle. Obviously the side opposite from that is going to be the smallest side, so that's S. The 60-degree angle is going to have an opposite side of S square root of 3, and then the hypotenuse is always going to be given by 2S. So same as the previous, when we did 45, 45, 90, the bottom row is determined by the picture that they're giving you, the sides of the triangles that they want you to solve. So the first one, again, is going to be the easy example, the easiest one. So opposite from my 30-degree angle, I have 3, so that goes below the 30. Opposite from the 60-degree angle, I have X, so that goes below the 60. And then opposite from the 90-degree angle, I have the Y, so that goes below the 90. And same thing, I'm going to set up 3 equations with the bottom 2 rows. So S equals 3, S squared of 3 equals X, and 2S equals Y. And so here they already gave me the value of S on the first equation, S equals 3. That means I'm going to take that 3 and I'm going to plug it in for the other 2 equations. So instead of a S, I have a 3 right there, and then square root of 3 stays, and that's it as my X value. So same thing with the Y, 2 is part of the formula, but the S, I gotta replace it with the 3. And so now I'm just gonna multiply those numbers to get Y. 2 times 3, that's 6. So Y equals 6. So pretty easy example because they already gave me S and it was a nice whole number, so I was able to easily plug that in into my other 2 equations. Okay, example 2. Still at 30, 60, 90. So I'm using the same chart, same table. Opposite from 30, I have X. Opposite from 60, I have 4 square root of 3. And opposite from 90, I have Y. So 3 equations. S equals X. S square root of 3 equals 4 square root of 3 with those 2. And then the last one, 2S equals Y. And so this time I'm gonna work with the middle equation because that is the equation where I have S as the only letter. But this time S is not by itself because there's a square root of 3 right next to it. So I'm gonna have to solve that equation. I'm gonna have to get rid of the square root of 3. There's no plus or minus sign, that means it's multiplication. So opposite of multiplication, division. So this time I'm gonna divide. So divide by square root of 3 on both sides, and I'm able to cancel it on both sides, and so I get S equals 4, and that's what I'm going to plug in into my other 2 equations. Okay, so I'm plugging in 4 for S, so here S is 4, and so that's also my X value. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to replace the S with the 4. And then I'm just going to multiply those 2 numbers. So 2 times 4 is going to give me 8 for Y. So still pretty easy. Again, I had nice whole number for S, so it was easy when I plugged it in to my other 2 equations. Okay, so let's look at the next 3 examples. Here I have x on the opposite side of 30. Opposite from the 60, I have the y. And then opposite from the 90, I have the 10. So my 3 equations are from the bottom 2 rows. So s equals x, s squared of 3 equals y, and 2s equals 10. And this time I start with the third equation because it's the equation where I only have the letter s. S is not by itself because there's a number right next to it, so I'm going to have to solve that equation. So to get rid of the 2 that's next to it, again I'm going to have to divide by 2 so I can cancel, and I got to do it on both sides. So I got s equals 5 because 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I'm going to take that 5 and I'm going to plug it into my other 2 equations. So my x value ends up being 5. And when I plug it in for my second equation, my y value is 5 square root of 3. Remember, cannot multiply those because one is outside the radical, the other one is inside the radical, so it stays. So still pretty easy with a nice whole number. Okay, this last 2, I'm working with radicals. Opposite from 30, I have 4 square root of 3. Even though I don't see it, I know this one has to be the 60. So opposite from the 60, that's x. And then opposite from the 90-degree angle, there's a y. So s equals 4 square root of 3. S square root of 3 equals s. And 2s equals y. Those are my 3 equations. And here they already gave me the value of s. They're telling me s equals 4 square root of 3. So that is what I'm going to plug in into my other 2 equations. So instead of s, I'm going to plug it in. I have 4 square root of 3. Square root of 3 is next to it, so I keep it. That equals x. So now I gotta multiply those 2. So got 4 square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3. And so 4 times 3 is 12. So my x is 12. And over here again I have to replace the s with the 4 square root of 3. So in parentheses I'm going to replace it with 4 square root of 3. Again, I can only multiply the numbers that are outside the square root. So 2 times 4, that's 8. And then the square root of 3 stays next to it. So that's my y value. And then the last example. So here my last example. I have opposite from the 30-degree angle, there's an x. Opposite from the 60-degree angle, there is a 6. And opposite from the 90-degree angle, there's a y. So s equals x, s square root of 3 equals 6, and then 2s equals y. Those are my 3 equations taken from the bottom 2 rows. And so I would start with the middle equation because that is where I have the s as the only letter. And this time s is not by itself because the square root of 3 is next to it. So I'm going to have to solve that equation. So I have to divide by square root of 3 so it could cancel. And I got to do it on both sides. And I have s equals 6 over the square root of 3. But remember, every time I have square root on the bottom, I have to get rid of it by multiplying it on the top and on the bottom. And so I have s equals 6 times the square root of 3, just they stay together, and then square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3 on the bottom. And so now I can divide the numbers outside of the square root. 6 divided by 3, that's 2, and the square root of 3 stays next to it. So now this is what I plug in. I plug in 2 square root of 3 into my other two equations. So when I plug it in for the first one, for x, that's just going to be my x value, because all I did was replace the s, and that's my x value. Same thing over here. I'm going to keep that 2, but instead of s, I'm going to plug in the 2 square root of 3, and then I'm going to multiply those two numbers. So 2 times 4, 2 times 2 is 4, and that square root of 3 stays inside, and that's my answer.